What's going on, y'all? Welcome back. It's Ars. Let's get productive. So today I want to talk about another one of my favorite companies. They're called Yum Audio, and they have a brand new plugin called Extractor. Now, this thing is really unique and really creative, and what it's going to allow you to do to your drum loops and other samples is completely change what it is that you're hearing. So we're going to dive into that in this review, and we're going to go over this new plugin Extractor, and we're going to check this thing out, see it in action. So without wasting any more time, let's get right into it. Yum Audio Extractor. Let's see what this thing is all about. So as always, I have Logic queued up, and this is Extractor. Now, you could take something like a drum loop that already has the hi-hats, the kicks, the snare, everything compressed into that loop itself. You could take out portions of the frequency and completely change the drum loop. You could take a drum loop that has hi-hats, all kinds of percussion, kicks, and snares, and just focus on the kick and the snare and completely eliminate the hi-hat portion of it. So you can really just completely change an entire loop itself. Let's dive into the UI itself and take a look at what's happening on the screen here, because it's really clean. Now, Yum Audio really makes dope UIs. They always have really clean looking UIs. The resolution is always really sharp and really just buttery smooth looking, and that's what this thing is right here. As you can see, you have the grayish tone, you have a little bit of the light grays, you have the highlighted yellows for the lemon, but I really love how this thing looks. It looks really clean, and it's just really cool to look at. Now, as we dive into what it is exactly that's happening inside of this plugin, right over here, you have your amount wheel, and this thing goes from 0 to 100%. This is going to tell the plugin how much you want to carve out or bring back in. This is where you dial this thing up and really put this plugin to work. This is where you're going to be able to take a look at that incoming audio signal. Now, you have portions of it that's going to be yellow, and you have portions of it that's going to be gray. The parts that you see that are yellow, that's the part of your audio signal that's being processed through Extractor, parts that are remaining in the actual audio, and the part that gets grayed out is the part that is getting cut out of the audio signal. Right over here at the bottom, you have your gain knob, and that's pretty self-explanatory. Up here at the top, you have your power on and off button, so you can turn on and off the plugin. Now, down underneath the amount wheel, you have your detection section, or your transient mode section. Now, this is where you can really dive into those transients and tell Extractor specifically when you want it to duck that frequency back. Over here, you have your transient mode and you have your beats mode. Now, when it's in beats mode, you can select different notations, and these notes are all in sync with your DAW. So if you go 1/16th, every 1/16th, Extractor is going to go to work and duck those notes back. So you can get really cool effects like that if you're using something like a synth or you're doing like house music. You can kind of get that side chain effect. Now, when it's in transient mode, Extractor is going to process the entire audio signal, and then it's up to you to kind of put this thing to work in the sections that you want it to work at. So in transient mode, you have two different types. You have type A and you have type B. So in type A, Extractor really goes to work in focusing on the transients of the drum loops inside of your sample. And in type B, Extractor is going to focus more on the bass transients and things like that, depending on whatever kind of sample you have loaded up. So depending on whatever kind of sample you have Extractor going to work on, you can toggle between type A or type B, or you can toggle between transient and beats. Over here on the right, where you see it says single band and multi-band, this is your processing section, and this is where you're going to tell Extractor if you want it to focus on the entire audio signal, or you want it to split that audio signal up into multi-band signals, and then Extractor will chop up that audio signal into a bunch of different bands and process those bands individually. And right underneath it, you have the details section where you can tell Extractor how tightly you want it to chop. So if you're processing something like a drum loop, and maybe you don't want any of the hi-hats and you just want the kick and the snare, you can put it on multi-band, and then you can maybe lower the details, and it's going to chop more and more and more and more of the frequencies out so that you get more of a choppy kick and snare, kick and pop sound in that drum loop. Or if you're processing a bass sound, maybe you want to add more detail so it doesn't eliminate too much of the tail of that 808 or whatever it is you're trying to process. If you don't want to eliminate too much of it, you want to just dial up the frequency bias in the detail section so that it doesn't make it too choppy. So it just depends on the audio signal and the sample and what it is you're trying to achieve with Extractor, but you can really dive in and get really detailed with the extraction. And that's about it. It's a really straightforward plugin, but it allows you to do some really cool and interesting techniques to your samples. And up top here, you have your presets. So what I want to do right now is go through some of the different presets and let you hear what those sound like. I have a drum loop queued up, and we're going to go through some of the presets, apply it to the drum loop so you can hear Extractor at work, and then we'll get into the cookup and I'll let you hear a beat that I created using Extractor on the drums. So before we play the presets, let's take a listen to this drum loop and just hear what the drum loop sounds like without Extractor on it. And so that's what the drums sound like without Extractor on it. As you can hear, there's a lot happening. It's not just a kick and a snare. There's a lot of percussion and stuff like that. And there may be portions of the beat that I create using this drum loop where I want the hi-hats to drop, or, you know, I want some of the percussion to drop. But because it's a drum loop and it's one wave file, it's impossible for me to really go in there and like chop out individual hi-hats and percussions in a way that's effective or even easy. So that's where Extractor comes into play, because I can now tell it what portions of the frequencies I want to be ducked out of the overall composition and what parts I want to stay and remain. So we're going to turn Extractor on. I'm going to go through some of the presets and we're going to just listen back to what this beat sounds like going through different presets. You can hear how tight that sounds, and if you notice down here in the detail section, the slider is pulled all the way down to negative 100%. So it's really only letting a portion of the transients kick and the snare through, and you can hear how tightly that sounds. And you have the squeeze knob turned all the way up. So you can hear it sounds very tight and choppy, and this preset says hat click, so this is to work more so towards your hats. So if you have a percussion loop or a hi-hat loop that's doing a lot, and there's a lot going on in the transients, there's a lot of shakers and congas and all kinds of different things happening, and you wanted to just focus on the transients of those hi-hats, you could put something like that into play, and you can even mess around with the amount knob and put less squeeze on it. So as you can see, I'm allowing more of the transients to come through. You could put it on multi-band mode and then play with the details knob. And even that is still in transient mode. I could go over the beats mode and play around with the different notes. Sounds like a completely different drum loop. So this is the drums with it off. And this is with it on. It even gives a little bit of a stutter effect to the hi-hats. But we could go through some more of the presets. Let's go through some more of these and see what it sounds like. Let's see if there's something here that can focus on the kick. This says sync kick extractor. So let's see what that does. Let's see what this preset does. So this is on beats mode. I can go over to transients mode. Just with the few tweaks that I did just now, it really calmed down the drum composition. Like there was a lot happening with the percussion and the hi-hats with this drum loop, and it really calmed it down. So you can hear the drums with Extractor off. And this is with Extractor on. And that's really it. A really simple plugin, really easy to use, but it allows you to dive in to these frequencies in a way that you either might not have been able to, or if you tried to do it, it would take a really long time. I mean, you could take a drum loop and really sit there and cut out all the portions of the transients that are focused on the hi-hats and stuff like that, but that could take an incredibly long time. And if you take something like this and really just mess around with it, you can go from having a drum loop that's full of congas and hi-hats and shakers and cymbals and all kinds of things and really make it just focus on the kick and the snare. I feel like we're in an era of plugins that anything is possible. And this is just another plugin that allows you to see that you can do anything with anything at this point in music production. So what I want to do right now is I want to get into the cookup and I want to show you guys what I created using Extractor. Now, I used Extractor on the drums of this beat. So the first half of the portion of this beat is just the regular drum loop. And then as we get into another portion of the beat, I put Extractor on and then I added my own shakers underneath to kind of change the percussion inside of the drum loop. So I took out a lot of the percussion that was happening in the drum loop using Extractor, and then I went back in and added my own shakers and different things to make the second half of the beat sound a little bit different than the first half, but while still using the same exact drum loop. And that's what's really incredible about this thing. I can use one drum loop and change it up a bunch of different times. So let me just show you what that portion of the beat sounds like just without Extractor on it. And then there's like a portion of the beat that I wanted to be a little bit different. So I added Extractor to the drum loop and then I added my own shakers and I got it to sound like this. So what we're gonna do right now is I'm gonna play this beat back that I made using Extractor and we're gonna just see what it sounds like. So let's check this thing out. So yeah, that's the beat I made using Extractor. Now, like I said in the beginning of this video, Yum Audio has created a plugin that is really useful. For someone like me, and if you are one of those type of producers that you love starting your production off with melody and chords, you like having the structure of your beat determined by the type of melody and chords you create in your composition, and you don't like starting off with the drums first necessarily. And then when you get your melody and your chords done, you don't like wasting a lot of time on drums. You like using a lot of drum loops and chopping drum loops up to just quickly find the groove that works best with the melodies and chords you created. If you're one of those type of producers that love to work like that, this plugin is going to be extremely useful for you, because at this point now you can take those drum loops and carve it out and really make it what you want it to be to truly fit the composition that you came up with melodically. So this is a really dope plugin. I think it's really cool that Yum Audio came up with this. In my book, Extractor is super dope. But let me know what you guys think. Is this something that you can see add into your arsenal? As always, leave a comment down below and let me know if there's any new VSTs or plugins that I should be checking out and bringing to the channel. If you're new to this channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you can stay notified anytime I drop a new video. And I'll catch you guys on the next one.